Hi everyone, this lecture is about the basics of early childhood. So this is kind of a get us going lecture, and then as we move on through the weeks we'll be covering things in much greater detail. But this particular lecture we're just going to talk in general about what early childhood is, who it serves, where those children are served, where they're served is paid for, how we can estimate the worth and quality of those facilities that serve young children, who works at those facilities, and what is needed to be a child care worker. So it's just kind of the nuts and bolts of early childhood. And then again, as we move on through the weeks, we're going to get into a lot more detail about all kinds of things related to early childhood education. An important place to start is just what is early childhood education. So early childhood education is education or teaching children, helping them to learn, grow developmentally, and thinking about that educational service for children from birth through age 0 up until age 8. So that covers children all the way up till 3rd grade. I think a lot of times people think that early childhood education tops out at preschool, and then once children get to elementary school, then it's not early childhood anymore. But the National Association for the Education of Young Children and other important organizations related to the field have determined that the early childhood period is birth through age 8. So typically when we're talking about children in this kind of broad age range, we think about how we can break it down a little farther and what some kind of sub-age groups are. So our first sub-age group is infants and toddlers. So infants and toddlers are children age 0 to 36 months. So this would be 0-year-old children, 1-year-old children, and 2-year-old children. So once children get to be 3, then they move into the next developmental age period, which is preschoolers. So preschoolers are 3 and 4-year-olds, and then kindergartners are 5 and 6-year-olds, and early elementary school or primary school is children in grades 1 through 3. Now, I do want to note that there is a new grade in the state of California called transitional kindergarten. So this is children who are at the high end of preschool and at the low end of kindergarten. So they would be 4 and 5-year-olds that would be potentially served in transitional kindergarten. So this is children who won't turn 5 in the fall in time to start elementary school or kindergarten, but they have probably been around the block a little bit already in preschool. So these are children who are going to turn 5 sometime in the fall, but don't make the kindergarten cutoff. So they are either eligible to be in preschool or they're eligible to be in transitional kindergarten. So if you're interested in setting up an early childhood facility, or if you're interested in working in one, it's important to understand that not only do we think about age, but we have other considerations when we're thinking about how to establish an early child care or childhood facility. So one of those considerations we already talked about. What age groups do you want to serve? So I am a full-time faculty member at Cal State University, San Bernardino. I mentioned that in my welcome video. And on our campus, we have an infant toddler child care program that is part of my department. I'm in the Department of Child, Adolescent, and Family Studies. And then we also have a preschool on campus that is part of student services. So our infant toddler facility serves children age 0, 1, and 2. And then our preschool serves children ages 3 and 4 primarily, and sometimes 5-year-olds if they haven't gone to transitional kindergarten or started kindergarten. So for us, we made a very conscious decision to only serve certain ages at each facility. Some child care programs serve children from birth all the way up through preschool. Elementary schools have obviously chosen to include transitional kindergarten, and grades 1 through 3. They don't do infants and toddlers on their school sites because that's not how they have set themselves up in terms of age. But there are other considerations beyond age that we can make as well. One, we can think about what income levels do we want to focus on. We can talk about how long we want to stay open every day. Are we going to be a half-day program, a full-day program? Are we going to include children with special needs or not include children who have those needs, which you can't really do because you're legally obligated to serve children with special needs, but we'll talk about that more in upcoming slides and lectures. But on the next few slides, we're going to talk about these considerations. We're going to think about, in an early childhood facility, who is going to be served at that facility, and are different kinds of facilities going to serve different kinds of children. So typically when decisions are being made about who's going to be served, we might refer to facilities that serve one group of children as being called one thing, and facilities that serve another type of children as being called another thing. So I'm just going to give you traditional terminology here and then talk about the fact that terminology doesn't really apply most of the time anymore. But once upon a time, if people talked about preschool, they meant a center that is educational, that its primary purpose is to educate young children before they start formal school or go to public elementary schools. Those typically catered to families who were middle or higher income because they cost money and childcare is expensive. So if you wanted to send your child to this preschool for educational preparation, you would need to pay tuition, and sometimes a lot, which is cost prohibitive for many families. And they were often only open for half of a day because it wasn't meant to be a full day program that cared for your child all day while you were at work. It was meant to be educational enrichment for a family member who could pick a child up at lunchtime or drop them off at lunchtime and then pick them up a few hours later. Now, the other kind of center, so if you were talking about childcare instead of preschool, you were probably talking about a place that was open all day long and was meant to serve your child while you were at work. It was not necessarily educational per se. It might do education related things, but really was more there to physically care for your child while you were at work and not able to physically care for your child yourself. A lot of times these kinds of centers, child care centers, were supported by state funding or federal funding to allow folks to go to work. And in that regard, they often ended up catering to lower income or families who are considered to be working poor, working really hard at probably many jobs to likely not have enough money, even though you're working a lot and hard to do all the things that you need to do. So truthfully, in our modern world, there is not much distinction between preschool and childcare, and really they're pretty much the same thing. When we get to our lecture next week, we're going to go a lot more in detail about the difference between kind of nursery preschools versus child care centers that were more physical care or custodial in nature. But for this particular slide, just suffice it to say that really most centers do both. Most centers are open all day because most parents work, and we'll talk about that more on another slide later, but most parents work and most parents need their children to be at childcare all day, but they also want their children to get educational experiences and grow and develop and be ready for next steps in life, in addition to just being physically cared for. Oftentimes, families are of mixed status socioeconomically. So some families might be receiving support, some families might be paying full tuition. It just depends on how much a family earns and how much they can afford to pay for with regard to childcare. So we really use these terms interchangeably at this point. We typically don't have a different connotation when we refer to a child care center versus a preschool. So early childhood is kind of a complicated landscape, and children are served in all kinds of different settings. So there's a lot of choices that families have in terms of where they might send their child or who might offer care. So one, the K through 12 setting definitely serves kindergartens, grades 1, 2, and 3. They have done that for a very long time. They've now gotten more in the business of preschool and transitional kindergarten, so they are serving children who are younger than they have typically served previously. Later, when we talk about qualifications needed to be a teacher, the qualifications of late have changed a little bit because there's a recognition that if K through 12 schools, if public schools are going to serve younger children, they need to have teachers who are qualified and ready to teach younger children, which is different than typical, elementary school age children. Even kindergarten through third is somewhat different than TK and PK. We have Head Start. So we're going to talk about Head Start quite a bit in our next lecture, but just suffice it to say for here that Head Start and Early Head Start are a federally funded program. So they serve some of the poorest children in our country, and the federal government pays for that service. And it provides a place for children who would be very unlikely for them to have the opportunity to go to preschool or to have the money to be able to do that. It provides an opportunity for those children to participate in early childhood programs. There's also state preschool. So state preschool is kind of like Head Start, but the money comes from the state. And children who get state preschool funding aren't quite as poor as children who get Head Start funding. So there's people who can pay full tuition. There's people who would struggle to do that and might get state funding and go to preschool that way. And then there's people who are even lower, kind of on the poverty scale, who would really not be able to pay for childcare, who would probably be qualified for Head Start. We also have family child care centers. So this is a person who opens a center in their home and invites children to come and be served in a home setting. Most of the time, family child care providers, they serve a broad age range of children. So they may have babies and preschoolers and elementary school age children. So there's, typically a mixed age, more family kind of feel. That is definitely a very popular option particularly for very young children. There are private centers. So private centers can be run through churches. A lot of times churches will offer up their Sunday school rooms to private centers to use during the week. These might be at a place of work, but these are typically centers where people have to pay to go. So Kinder Care, Tutor Time, Bright Horizons, these are all examples of private centers where there is not federal or state funding and people pay tuition. Now, sometimes even these private centers do offer funding. So like our preschool at the Cal State San Bernardino campus is a private center, it's part of Cal State San Bernardino, and some families pay full tuition, but we also have state funding. So sometimes there are families there who receive that as well. So that one's kind of a mixed center. There are military child care centers. So the military has a very extensive network of centers. If you go way out into the desert, out to Fort Irwin, out towards the Barstow area, Fort Irwin has child care on the base that is for military families. So when they are deployed or when they are doing their military work, they have somewhere for their children to be cared for. There is something called a parent cooperative. So I went to Purdue University for my graduate school work, and we had a parent cooperative nursery. So it was a space, and it was only open when there were parents volunteering to care for the children there. So it basically is just a group of parents that says, hey, we're going to all take turns. We're going to care for each other's children, and they share the work in generally donated spaces, but they could pay for those spaces as well. There are things called lab schools. So the infant toddler facility at Cal State San Bernardino is also considered to be a laboratory school. So lab schools serve children, but they also do research on early childhood development and care. And they're also a training facility for up-and-coming teachers. So your center at Crafton is not quite a lab school. It serves children, and it's also a teaching facility so that you can go do hours there and learn how to become a teacher, but it doesn't do research. So it's not quite the lab school model, but it's close. So lab schools are very frequently at universities, particularly universities who do research related to early care and education, and also are training people to work with young children in educational settings. So I know I already mentioned Head Start. That's what the like HS means in the parentheses in the second to last bullet, but I did want to mention that Head Start is also considered to be something called a comprehensive program. So comprehensive programs don't just provide childcare, they also provide other things like parent education and health services. So if there's a program that provides a lot of different things, so Head Start does provide health services, it does parent education, parents are trained to work as teachers in the facility. So when you're touching children and families' lives in more than just an educational way, then you're considered to be a comprehensive program. And finally, I would be remiss to not mention that sometimes children are cared for at home by relatives. That's what kith and kin care is. So kith and kin are your relatives. So your mom or your grandma or an aunt or a sister or a brother or an uncle. Anybody in your family who is helping to care for children would be considered to be kith and kin care. Different than family child care. Family child care is a person who is not related generally. Often their own children are there, but they're generally not related to the children that they serve, whereas kith and kin would be caring for children that you're related to, often being unpaid. So another consideration when setting up child care programs, facilities, etc., is thinking about who the children are going to be. So not just what their family's income is or how long they want to be there or what they're coming there for, education or just custodial care, but who is going to come. Now, I'm not going to spend a long time on this slide because we're going to be covering diversity-related issues and children with special needs in upcoming lectures in much more detail. But I do just want to briefly mention that this is part of the landscape of early childhood. So are you going to serve children with special needs? Now, again, if you're receiving any kind of public funding, you have to serve children with special needs. There isn't a choice in the matter. And again, I'll be talking more about why that is the case. Now, if you're a private center, you're not taking money from anybody and that's not what you want to do, then you don't have to. Another choice is serving children who are diverse. So again, if you are a public facility, you don't have a choice in serving children who are diverse in many different ways. If you're a private facility, it wouldn't be a good idea, but I suppose you could do that. There are rules and regulations about who needs to be served and how they need to be served. But I do want you to recognize that there's a diverse landscape in our country. So there are children with and without disabilities. There are children who differ from each other in terms of race. There are children who differ from each other in terms of ethnicity and nationality and language and socioeconomic status. So it's really important in the field that we're in to be prepared to work with children who come from various backgrounds. And again, we will be talking about this quite a bit more. So childcare is a complicated landscape, not just in who is served and what kinds of settings those happen in, but also how the funding is pieced together. So it is not like the public K through 12 system where there's one way that things are funded, and once children reach a certain age, they can all go to the same facility. Anybody who lives in the state of California in the city of Yucaipa gets to go to Yucaipa public schools if they want, once they reach the correct age. For younger children, before they get to first grade age, because kindergarten and transitional kindergarten are not mandatory. So you can take your child if you want, but you don't have to. But once your child gets to be in first grade, they have to go to some sort of public education. So you either need to register to homeschool them, or you need to take them to public school, which is paid for by the government. But prior to that, if you want to take your child, where you're going to take your child, it's a smorgasbord. And not is it just a smorgasbord of types of facilities, but it's also a smorgasbord of funding. So as I kind of alluded to before, there is federal funding. So military care is funded by the federal government. Head Start is funded by the federal government. I actually run a program at Cal State San Bernardino that receives funding from the federal government. So this is a program that helps students, parents who are college students who have low SES or low socioeconomic status to pay for childcare. So if I have student parents who enroll at the Infant Toddler Lab School and they qualify for Pell funding to help pay for their education, the C Campus program will help pay for part of their childcare. So C Campus means childcare access, means parents in schools. It's a grant that universities can apply for, and then it can help pay childcare tuition for student parents who are struggling financially. There are also state funds. So in the state of California, the program that services young children is called the California State Preschool Program. So if you sign up to be a California State Preschool Program, the state will send you money to help pay tuition for families who might not otherwise be able to afford childcare. So as I mentioned previously, our preschool on campus is called the Children's Center, and it is a state preschool program. And so it gets funding from the state of California to help our families be able to pay their childcare tuition. So I've also mentioned that sometimes centers are just private pay and parents pay the tuition. So at the Infant Toddler Lab School and at the Children's Center, we actually have a mixture. So some families are on the California State Preschool Program, some families are receiving C Campus funding, and some families who use the facility are able to pay our tuition, and so they just pay it outright. And there are some centers that is the only way that you can go. So there is a Montessori program in Redlands, and that is a full fee, parent pay kind of facility. They run completely off of parent tuition. Sometimes there's employer-sponsored childcare where an employer kicks in. Maybe the employer provides building space. So actually, the Infant Toddler Lab School is employer-sponsored as well because we don't pay building rent and we don't pay any of the utilities. We just have to pay our staff, which is a lot of money. But there are some employers who recognize that providing childcare is a way to encourage people to apply and then also retain employees once they have started working at your company. So Disney is a company that sponsors childcare and provides childcare opportunities for people who work for them. I actually had a couple students many years ago who, when they graduated, they went to work in the LA area for Disney childcare. It was a great job. They got to go to Disney for free all the time, which how can anyone be unhappy with that? So centers can't become centers unless they are licensed. So the only way you can avoid this is if you're doing kith and kin care. So if your niece is coming over in the afternoon, you do not have to be licensed. If you have kids coming to your home that are not related to you and you don't have very many of them, you can get away with not being licensed. But once you hit a certain number, If you're serving children in your home, or if you're serving children in a building, a child care center, you have to get licensed. So the state of California has something called Title 22 regulations. And if you want to open a facility, either a family child care home or a child care center, you must work with California Community Care Licensing and follow all the Title 22 regulations and get licensed. And then also be visited occasionally to make sure that you're upholding the regulations that allowed you to get that license in the first place. So if you are in an elementary school, so if you are a public school, public K through 12 school in the state of California, you don't have to use Title 22. You get to use something called Title 5. But again, it's a license. It's saying that we have met these regulations and we are following rules that allow us to be able to safely serve young children in our facility. So no public school, no private centers, none of the centers we talked about, except kith and kin, and maybe if you're a really tiny family child care. But if you want to be any other kind of facility, you have to get licensed either under Title 22 or Title 5. Licensing is like the floor. So licensing is kind of the rock bottom minimum things you need to be doing to make children assure that children are safe. So you have to have locked gates. You have to have fences that are too high for kids to climb over. You need to make sure that you're not going to burn children with hot water in the sink. You need to have ways to get out of the room. You need to be accessible to people with disabilities. So there's a lot of things that you have to do that really don't have that much to do with the education of the children or the quality of care that they're receiving from teachers. It's more about safety. Like, is there a teacher there to watch and make sure that children don't get hurt? Which is very important, right? We definitely want to have that floor of safety, but sometimes centers choose to go above and beyond. They choose to do better than just the floor and aspire to reach the ceiling. So if a center aspires to reach the ceiling, they can be accredited. So if you're an accredited center, it means that you have not just passed those licensing regulations, but you have also demonstrated that you are providing exemplary care, that you have amazing teachers who interact with children in the most fabulous of ways, that you offer a wonderful educational program, that you have highly trained staff, that you include and interact well with families, all the good stuff that we're going to be talking about in upcoming classes and lectures. So if you are a child care center and you want to become accredited, you can do so through the National Association for the Education of Young Children. Both of the centers at Cal State San Bernardino that I have mentioned are accredited by NAEYC. If you are a family child care program and you want to be accredited, you would do so through the National Association for Family Child Care. Both are very extensive, lengthy processes, which is why a lot of facilities don't pursue accreditation, but it really is a mark of distinction if you have been through that process. On the next few slides, I'm going to talk about how to become an early childhood educator and why you would want to do that. So we're going to focus more on that career because that's really the purpose of this particular class, is to talk about early childhood education and how to become an early childhood educator. But I do want to point out that if you are interested in working with children and families, that there's actually lots of careers that you can have. So if you were interested and wanted to come to Cal State San Bernardino and finish your degree in the department that I work in, Child, Adolescent, and Family Studies, we prepare people to be teachers of young children, but we also prepare them to do other things with children and families. So as I said, in the next few slides, I'm going to talk about how to work with young children in schools, but I also wanted to point out that there are careers adjacent or related to being a teacher in a school. So you can be an administrator or a director at a child care center. You can be a school psychologist. You can be a guidance counselor. You can also do careers with young children and families that are not in schools. So you can do medical related things. You can be a pediatric dentist. You can be a pediatrician. You can be a neonatal nurse. You can be a child life specialist, who is a person who helps children through medical procedures but is not a medical professional themselves. That's the picture on the bottom right of this slide. You can be a parent educator. You can do positive youth development, so that is related to the picture on the top right, so maybe working in camps or after-school programs, youth sports programs, those kinds of things. You can be a therapist of all kinds. You can be a clinical counselor where you see children and families for therapy. You can be a speech and language therapist. You can be an occupational therapist. You can be a physical therapist, so all kinds of therapists. You can be a social worker. So all kinds of things that you can do. So I would encourage you to take a look at the link on this slide about the 20 careers working with children, so you can see the broad variety of things that you can do with this field that you're studying. Choosing a career is something definitely worth taking some time to do. So it's really important to go research different careers and really think about what might be interesting to you. But this is a little bit of information on this slide in terms of thinking about whether a career in early childhood education, so being a teacher of young children, is something that might be a good fit. So I would encourage you to watch the little video on this slide, and then also to take a look at the graphic. Do you like kids? Do you enjoy working with them? Are you fun? Do you like being creative and coming up with new ideas and getting down and dirty and in the mud and getting paint? Are you patient? Because young children are fabulous and wonderful and beautiful, but they take a lot of patience. Are you compassionate? Do you have a soft heart? Do you, feel when other people are feeling things? Because little people have big feelings and they need someone who can lean into them when they're feeling all the things. Are you interested in this field? Do you want to study the things that we're studying? Do you want to learn more about children and how they grow and learn? Because that's a really important piece. You have to really learn about what children can and can't do and where they're at developmentally, because that will make you a better educator. If you know what's typical for 2-year-olds or 4-year-olds or 6-year-olds, you're going to be better at your job, and you will be more patient, be more compassionate, because you understand what's going on with the child. So a lot of important things to consider, but I think bottom line, if you don't like working with children, it's probably not the right thing for you. Even if you do like working with children, I would encourage you to try out different ages and different settings. I thought that she wanted to be an elementary school teacher. She started taking elementary school classes and volunteered in an elementary school and realized that that wasn't really the right fit for her, that she really loves being in early childhood centers. She was a preschool teacher and kind of like that, but then she became a toddler teacher and loved that, was 100% the right place for her skills, for the age of children that she wanted to be working with. So really important to try out different things as you're moving along, taking these classes and getting your degree so that you can land in the right place eventually. So if you decide that you do want to be an early childhood educator, there are requirements that you need to pay attention to. So sometimes they are educational requirements and sometimes they are experience requirements. So if you want to work in a public school, so if you want to work for the Kaipa school district, you want to be a transitional kindergarten teacher or a kindergarten teacher or a grade 1, 2, or 3 teacher, you need to get a teaching credential. So you have two options. You can get a multiple subjects teaching credential or a PK through 3 early childhood specialist instruction credential. I know, very long mouthful. So these are both things that you do after you have a bachelor's degree. So you need to finish at Crafton, Then you need to come over to a 4-year university like Cal State San Bernardino. And then once you're done with your bachelor's degree, then you apply to get a teaching credential. So the multiple subject credential qualifies you to teach grades kindergarten through 12. If you get that credential and you want to teach transitional kindergarten, you need to have 24 units of child development, which I'm sure that you're already getting. If you want to have a shorter range, a smaller range of children that you can teach, you can get the PK through 3 early childhood credential. So that would allow you to teach preschool, transitional kindergarten, kindergarten, and grades 1 through 3. So multiple subject credential, grade kindergarten through 12, PK through 3, preschool, transitional kindergarten, and K through 3 in an elementary school. Also, remember, if you get that multiple subject credential and you want to drop down to TK, you're going to need 24 units of child development to be able to do so. Remember I said earlier that now that the public schools are taking on more responsibility for early childhood, that we need to make sure that people have the training to be able to work with younger children that they may not have gotten when they were preparing to work with older children. So in the state of California, if you want to work in a private school setting, you need to have a child development permit. Now, if you work in a center that is completely funded by parent fees, they may or may not ask you to have this permit. If you work in a state preschool program, they will definitely ask you to have this permit because they receive funding. So the child development permit, you can click on that link and learn more about it. It is a way to combine coursework and experience or to just use your degree. So if you're combining coursework and experience, you're taking a certain set of courses and then you're also working for a certain amount of time in a child care program. If you're going the degree route, you just get particular degrees. You get an AA degree at a community college, you get a BA degree at a 4-year university, and then that also allows you to get a child development permit. There are different levels of the permit. There's the most entry level to be an assistant teacher, all the way up to being a director. So depending on what coursework experience or degree you have, depends on what level of the permit that you're able to get. So in addition to having the proper credentials or permits, you also want to make sure that you are just being a professional in the field. So professionalism means behaving ethically. We're going to talk more about that later. Understanding children, making good choices, being the best professional that you can be. One way to do this is by joining organizations. So you can join the National Association for the Education of Young Children. Join an organization called 0 to 3. So there's all kinds of professional organizations that help you to stay in touch with other professionals, give you up-to-date information, and make sure that you're kind of staying abreast of what's going on in the field. It's also important to continue your education and your training. So continue to take classes, sign up for training opportunities. There's, all kinds of opportunities online that you can go to. Sometimes your work offers training that you can take advantage of. We have a care certificate at Cal State San Bernardino that's open to the public for people to come and take. So part of being a professional is continuing to learn and grow across time. I wanted to finish this lecture by talking about why early childhood education is important. So on the next few slides, we're going to be covering these 4 points. We're going to talk about how early childhood education is important because it's economically vital for our country. We're going to talk about how it leads to good developmental outcomes for the children who are served, that it leads to good to good outcomes for our economic survival as a country, and because it provides equitable experiences for all children, which is important to make sure that everybody gets opportunities, not just a certain select few. So for a long time in our country, a large population of people who are parents have worked. It has been hovering at like 60 to 70% for decades of the number of parents who have young children under the age of 6 who go to work every day. So childcare isn't just a luxury. It's not just oh, I want to send my child to childcare. Most parents need to send their children to childcare because they're out doing things to, put food on the table at their houses. And it's important. So it's really not something that we can do without. There really is an economic necessity for the reality of people's work and family lives. So I would encourage you to watch the video on this slide. It's a spoof. It's meant to be funny, but it's also meant to show seriously how childcare is an important part of the fabric of our society, and things just kind of stop working if childcare is not present and available to families. Not only is it important for families who need to work that we offer childcare and allow children to take advantage of that opportunity, but it's good for the children themselves. So there is lots of research to show that what happens during the early years of a child's life are critically important for their later development and success and happiness and even just general health and well-being. So I would encourage you to watch the video at the right. It's from the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University. In addition, that center has all kinds of important information related to young children and why it's so critical that they get good, high-quality care with nurturing adults early in life to make sure that they have the best possible developmental outcomes. And early childhood education sites, any of the ones that we talked about, are an important part of that environmental landscape that children are interacting in. So their families are important, their neighborhoods are important, their healthcare systems are important, and their early childhood education systems are important. So I'm just sharing a couple examples here. Honestly, there's study after study after study that I could share with you to show why early childhood education is important, but I wanted to share with you an elementary school one and then also an early childhood, more traditional preschool one. So the first is the AIR TK study. So AIR is the American Institute for Research, and it is a research institution in the United States that focuses on educational issues. And so when California started doing transitional kindergarten, AIR, again, the American Institute for Research, collected data on the children that were going to transitional kindergarten and the experiences that they had, and they found that overall kids did well in transitional kindergarten, that they had kind of a leg up coming into kindergarten on literacy and mathematics, and that it was effective for all groups of children. So it didn't matter income, race, language, etc. It did not seem to matter so much for cognitive skills, so it didn't really help with executive functioning skills like working memory and being able to pay attention. It didn't reduce the rate of problem behavior, so it wasn't really so much like general thinking or social emotional or regulation kind of stuff. It just seemed to mostly have an advantage for literacy and mathematics skills. So Head Start, which again we will talk about more in upcoming lectures and slides, they collect data. So they are a national laboratory school. So they both teach people how to be teachers, they provide childcare for children, and they do research. So they collect data on themselves and the services that they provide. And if you click on the link at the bottom of this slide, you will see a report from the National Head Start Association. And Head Start has all kinds of good benefits for children, both academic skills that help kids get ready for kindergarten, but also cognitive skills, social skills, emotional skills, regulation skills, all the goodies that lead to a good, long, healthy, well-developed life after the early childhood period is over. So just like childcare is good for the economics of families and being able to go to work, it's also good for children themselves. Another benefit of childcare, and this is again related to the economy, but not so much personal economy of I need to go to work and I need somewhere for my child to go. And my employer is going to be sad if I don't have childcare for the day and I can't come to work because I don't have childcare to be able to use, or it's closed for whatever reason. But there's a larger economic landscape that makes early childhood really important and worth paying attention to. And that is just money that is invested and money that we get back on that, that we have a return on our investment, basically. So there have been multiple studies that have shown that when kids go to particularly high quality childcare, so not just childcare, but high quality childcare, especially childcare that provides those more comprehensive services, the parenting and health, along with education, that for every dollar that is put into that, multiple dollars get pumped back out. So I'm talking about right now the middle piece of the text on this slide. So where it says research from demonstration projects, and that's related to the graph on the right. So the graph on the right is showing you 3 demonstration projects. So projects that were designed to be childcare, but also to collect data and see how advantageous these childcare programs are down the road. And here's what they found. So there was the Perry Preschool Study, the Carolina Abecedarian Project, and the Chicago Child Parent Centers. So they found that children's long-term achievement increased, and they followed these kids until they were like in their 20s, 30s, 40s, so they have longitudinal data. They've been following these kids for a long time, and they found that they all had higher achievement, that all these programs reduced special education placement. So for kids in the Perry Preschool Project, special ed placements were at 37%. Kids who were not, it was 50%, so much higher. That they were less likely to be retained in grade school, that they were more likely to have higher high school graduation, and they were less likely to be arrested by age 21. Those are just some of the indicators as an example. But if we also look down at the bottom, I want you to look down at the bottom number where it says benefit cost ratio. So for every dollar that we spent on kids who went to the Perry Preschool, we got $17 in return in the economy. For every $4 that we spent at the Carolina Abecedarian on a child, or excuse me, for every $1 we spent per child who went to the Carolina Abecedarian Project, we got almost $4 in return. For every $1 per child who went to the Chicago Child Parent Centers, we got about $7 in return. So it's a great investment. I mean, I would like to have that kind of investment, especially one where I put in $1 and I got $17 back. So early childhood isn't just something we do to be kind. It's something we do that has positive impacts on all of us. We get a good rate of return on the money that we invest. So another piece of this is the bullet down at the bottom, the Heckman equation. So James Heckman is an economist, and he is very interested in childcare, and he's very interested in things like the economic returns that childcare provides. But one of the other things that he has asserted and has data on is that when we spend more money at the beginning, it's easier to solve problems. We can more cheaply do it. So the Harvard Center on the Developing Child also says the same thing, that if I have intervention that starts when a child is 1, I have to do less to get the child to change than I would if I went and tried to change them when they were 15. So I have to expend less effort. The younger the child is, the less work I have to do to fix something that might be broken. It also costs me less money. So if a child is 2 and I do early intervention, 1, I'm more likely to help their developmental skills more than if I wait until they're 10, but it's also going to take less money to increase their developmental skills than it would if I waited until they're 10. So good for the child, good for the economy. And then finally on this slide, I would encourage you to listen to this podcast, the This American Life podcast. Oklahoma was one of the first states to have universal pre-kindergarten, and they have had great success with it. And the reason that their governor wanted to do it and stuck with it and made it a thing for everybody was honestly economics. It helps kids, but it was also an economic boon for the state of Oklahoma. So it would be a very interesting podcast for you to listen to on sort of the economic benefits of childcare. So as I stated earlier, we're going to come back to diversity issues later, but I do just want to briefly say in this section that childcare is not just good for kids who are middle class and white and typically developing and middle income or higher income. It's good for everybody. And so, I was sharing with you on an earlier slide about how early childhood education, particularly when it's high quality, leads to good developmental outcomes for all children. But the research data is also very clear that it gives the best outcomes for kids who may be starting with the least. So kids who are poor, children of color, children who are linguistically diverse, children who are not developing in sort of the prototypical fashion, high quality childcare is the most advantageous for these groups of children. So it's important for everybody, but it's particularly important for kids who might have opportunity access issues, because oftentimes kids with fewer means and children of color and children who are linguistically diverse are less likely to be able to access services and resources, and maybe less likely to enroll in preschool programs, because even though there's financial assistance to be in preschool programs, there are not enough spots for everybody. So a lot of kids don't get to participate because there just isn't room for them, even at centers that serve children of lower income, which children of color and children who are linguistically diverse are oftentimes more likely to be poor than children who are not in those demographic groups. So it's really important for them to get access, in particular because they might be missing out. So a lot of times people talk about, oh, these kids are just behind or they don't know as much. It's not really a knowledge gap, it's an opportunity gap. If you're missing out on opportunities to gain those kinds of experiences and knowledge, you're going to look like you have a knowledge gap. So the goal is to not let children get behind, because children who get behind tend to stay behind. So we want to make sure that everybody has a fair shot at having the same outcomes as everybody else. So in the next couple slides, I want to talk about how we can measure quality. So first we'll talk about how to measure program quality, and then we'll talk about how to measure outcomes for children. So we've already talked about licensing and accreditation. So licensing is a way to measure sort of the bottom quality, sort of the floor quality. Really what we're assessing is like basic safety requirements. If we want to get at a higher level of quality measurement, then we might look at accreditation documents and how someone did in the accreditation process. That's going to give us a better idea of the program and how it is addressing ceiling quality level issues. But there are some other ways that we can navigate measuring program quality as well. So one is by using documents created by NAEYC. Now I'm not going to talk about these a lot here because we're going to talk about them in an upcoming lecture in much more detail, and you'll also have an assignment related to these documents, but just suffice it to say that they're the ones who do accreditation, so they have documents related to that. They have documents that talk about what ethical standards we should uphold as early educators. They have documents that talk about what teachers should be able to do who work with young children. So various documents that help us to think about what quality can look like that we can use to evaluate how programs are doing. California has also developed documents as well. So we have documents that help us to think about what college level programs should be teaching people who want to be teachers. And there's also a document that I've referenced here. It's the Early Childhood Educator Competencies, and it lays out what an early childhood educator should be able to do in various areas. So how they should interact with children, how they should assess children, how they should create curriculum for children. So we can use these documents to take measure of the folks who are working in child care centers and how well they meet these competencies. So finally, a very popular way to measure the quality of programs is to do something called a QRIS. So a QRIS is a quality rating improvement system. So I actually happen to work for both the County of San Bernardino and the County of Riverside and on QRIS systems. And so what we do in the QRIS is we send assessors out. So we have people go out and assess the quality of classrooms, and then we write up reports, and those reports are given to coaches, and then coaches work with providers to help increase the quality of the education landscape that they're providing. So what my piece of the project is we recruit students who are going to Cal State San Bernardino, particularly those majoring in child, adolescent, and family studies, and we teach them how to use different measures of assessment. So we used to teach them how to use both the CLASS, which is the Classroom Assessment Scoring System, and the ERS, which is the Environmental Rating Scale. You'll probably talk about these if you're taking the observation methodology class. Now we only teach people how to use the CLASS. Our local projects aren't using ERS anymore, but we teach them how to use the CLASS. We get them trained, and then we send them out to child care centers and family care homes, and we have them do a CLASS assessment, and then again they write up a report. They deliver that report to a coach, and then the coach takes it from there and helps to work with providers to do better. So the kinds of things that we're working on structural and process quality. So structural quality is related to how many teachers do you have per child? What qualifications do those teachers have? How many kids are in a classroom? How do you set up the furniture in the classroom? What kind of schedule do you have? So it's very tangible, structural things that are kind of easy to fix. We also look at process quality. So how kind are teachers to children? What's the tone of the classroom? What kinds of verbal interactions are teachers having? What kinds of interactions are they having when children are in learning spaces? So we try and work with teachers on both these structural and these process quality pieces because, as I said earlier, we know that those benefits of childcare are most likely to come when childcare is high quality. So if we can help providers to increase the quality of care they're providing, we're more likely to get good developmental outcomes for the children. So it's really important to also measure how children are doing because it's really difficult to tell how we're doing if we're delivering good quality, if we're not going and checking and seeing what kind of outcomes children actually have. So there's various ways that we can do this. So if children are in elementary school, once they get to be third grade, so we just barely tap into Common Core. There are Common Core standards for younger children, but we don't officially assess children until they're in grade 3. So it would just be at the high end of early childhood that we're going to be assessing them with this smarter balanced assessment system. So the Common Core standards outline things that children should be learning and be able to do in the different grades in elementary school. And then the smarter balanced assessment is checking to see if children are actually acquiring those skills. For younger children, we use something called learning standards. So learning standards are basically the same as a Common Core standard. They are ideas or benchmarks for what children should be able to do at particular ages. So in the state of California, we have infant toddler learning development foundations. So these are things that infants and toddlers should be learning and doing in their early childhood classrooms. And then we also have the preschool transitional kindergarten learning foundations. Those learning foundations are ones for kids in pre-K and TK, and that shows what children at those two ages or grade levels should be doing. So if we're talking about younger children and we want to assess how they're doing in meeting those learning foundations or those milestones, then we have to, we use something called the DRDP, and I've put a little example of this in the bottom right corner. So you're going to observe children and take notes and take pictures and take work samples, and then you're going to use that observational information to determine how well children are meeting these milestones or these learning foundations or these benchmarks. So I've given you the current DRDP, and then I also included a link to some changes that are coming related to the DRDP that are in process but aren't quite here yet. So I kind of alluded to this before, but I just wanted to make very clear that it's important for us to think about how to serve everyone, not just certain groups of children, because that's who we are in the United States. We are a diverse group of people, and over time we're becoming actually more diverse. And if you're going to live and work in California, California is a particularly diverse place. So in the United States as a whole, the population of white people is declining, and people of color are sort of filling in the gaps, so to speak. And that is more true for children than it is for adults. So in the United States, this was back in 2018, so this was 7 years ago. So this is a little outdated, but reasonably close to now. So out of the total US population, about 60% of the population is white, but for children, only 50% is white. And we have about 25% of children are Hispanic or Latino, 18% of the total population, and you can kind of see we're a very diverse country and we're becoming more diverse all the time. The other thing that's important to understand that is California is even more diverse than that. So the national rate of children who are Hispanic or Latino is 25%, but in California, 50%, 52% of children in California are Latino. So about half the kids we're serving are from some Latinx country, so we need to make sure that we're accounting for that. Which also brings us to the issue of language. 40% of children in California speak a language other than English. A primary language is Spanish, but that's not the only language in addition to English that children in California speak. So, very important to know that you're going to have racial ethnic diversity, and you're also going to have language diversity. And in California, about 25% of children who live here live in poverty. And the only reason that number isn't higher is because of the social support systems that we do have in place. So food assistance and child care assistance and healthcare assistance, those are things that help reduce the number of families in poverty, but it's still very high. So you're going to be serving children of great diversity. And so we want to make sure that the programs that we offer are welcoming and appropriate for all. I want to finish off by talking about some current trends. I'm going to be honest, not all of them are actually current trends. Some of them have been the reality for a long time in the field. One is funding. Funding is always up in the air. Depends on the administration. It depends on people's feelings at the time. It depends on whether people are approving of working mothers or all the other reasons that children need to go to childcare. So that's always kind of a little bit up in the air about what's happening. In more recent years, we had actually made quite a bit of ground, and most people were pretty favorable about providing childcare and making that access more universal. I'm not quite sure where that is headed currently. We'll have to kind of wait and see on that one, as we don't know the current administration's plans exactly on all that. But that is always something that is, at the whim of whoever is currently in office. Another big issue that's always an issue is pay. Early childhood providers don't tend to make a lot. I would really encourage you to look at information and data on this website that I've provided, the Center for the Study of Child Care Employment. They collect a lot of data on teachers, their education, their pay, their stress, their job realities, because it is a high stress job. It's a fairly low paid job and it's a high stress job. So it's a great job. There's lots of really wonderful things about it, but it doesn't tend to be the most high paid. There's challenges post-COVID. So teachers have reported a lot more behavioral, social, emotional, regulatory issues than they had previously, and that is something that's always a challenge with young children, but seems to have been on the rise post-COVID. Getting kids back out there, you got to remember that a lot of these little friends who are in preschool were born during COVID and may not have gone anywhere, or it may have been very stressful at home, lots of things related to that. There's a little bit of a challenge right now. So universal pre-K is great on the one hand. It's awesome to think about all children being served in preschool. But as I showed you before, it's kind of a fractured system. So there isn't one place that young children go to be educated. They go to many different places who all now have to figure out how to work together. And we don't want to lose private centers just because the public school system has now decided that they want to help with early childhood too. We also have to figure out how to have better alignment between early childhood and elementary school. A lot of times when elementary schools get involved in the early childhood landscape, they start pushing their curriculum down younger and younger. So I was a kindergarten teacher about 30 years ago, and what I did in first grade back in the day is now what kindergartners and transitional kindergartners and preschoolers do. So we just keep shoving down these kind of high academic requirements, this effort to make sure that kids are ready, rather than just focusing on early childhood and letting children engage in more play, which has been shown through research to have good developmental benefits, but also helps children to be ready for academics as well. You don't have to have kids do worksheets just to help them be ready for kindergarten. We'll talk about that later too. If you want to know a little bit more about some of these changes and kind of what the current landscape is in early childhood, I would encourage you to read the policy brief that's down at the bottom of this slide. That kind of gives you a little bit more extended explanation than I did just now.